It was a quiet morning in the small town of Harrison Creek, the sun casting long shadows over the abandoned streets as a soft breeze blew through the trees. Little did anyone know that under the cover of the mundane, a sinister event was unfolding in a secluded part of the town, a place no one dared to visit. A young boy named Eli, only 15 years old, was playing outside his home, as he often did during the summer. He lived on the edge of the town, where the road met the thick woods that stretched far into the distance. That morning, though, something unusual caught his eye. He had been playing near the edge of the woods when he saw two men in uniform, police officers, walking into the trees with something large and heavy. Eli squinted his eyes and crept closer, his curiosity getting the better of him. The officers didn't see him as they moved deeper into the woods. Eli wasn't sure what they were carrying at first, but the large, bulky object they struggled to lift seemed out of place. He knew better than to get too close, but his instincts told him to keep watching. Through the thick underbrush, he could just make out the shape of the white cloth they draped over something large and heavy, obscuring whatever it was. Eli's heart raced with a sense of unease. What were the officers hiding in the woods? He had seen them on patrol before, but they were always friendly. These men seemed different. The way they moved, the urgency in their steps, it was as if they were trying to conceal something. Eli crouched behind a bush, trying to stay hidden, but his eyes never left the officers. He could hear them muttering to each other, their voices too low for him to catch the words, but the atmosphere around them felt wrong. It wasn't until they reached an isolated area of the woods that they paused. One of the officers knelt down, pulling out a large shovel and starting to dig in the soft ground. Eli's stomach turned. What were they doing? Why were they digging a hole in the woods? And why did the body, it was becoming clear now that what they were hiding was a body, have to be covered in such an odd way? Eli's gaze moved from the officers to the white cloth they had laid out. There was something about the bloodstains visible on the edges of the cloth that made his pulse quicken. The blood wasn't dry, it was fresh. He could barely breathe, his heart pounding in his chest. As the officers continued their work, the ground was covered, and they quickly moved the body into the hole they had just dug. They covered it up swiftly, not wanting to leave any trace behind, but their hurried movements only made Eli more suspicious. Once they finished, the officers paused and exchanged a look. Eli, still hidden behind the bush, barely dared to move. What had they just buried? And why was there so much blood? His thoughts raced as he realized the enormity of what he had just witnessed. His instincts screamed at him to run home, to tell someone, to scream for help. But he couldn't. He was too terrified to move, too confused by the scene he had just witnessed. It felt wrong, so terribly wrong. The officers stood silently for a moment, almost as if they were waiting for something, before turning to leave. One of them looked back toward the spot they had just buried, whatever, or whoever, was underneath the earth, but Eli was already slipping away, his heart still racing. As the officers disappeared into the trees, Eli crept back to his house, his mind swirling with the question, what had they buried? And what did it have to do with them? Eli couldn't shake the image of what he had seen. His mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. The body in the woods, the officers' strange behavior, the blood-stained cloth. All of it felt like a nightmare. But it was real. He had witnessed it, and he couldn't ignore it. As soon as he got home, he ran straight to his room, his heart thumping in his chest. He locked the door and sat on the bed, staring at the floor, his mind spinning. What should he do? He wasn't supposed to know about this. He wasn't supposed to have seen it. He thought about telling his mother. He thought about telling someone at school. But what if they didn't believe him? What if they thought he was just making up stories? He was just a kid, after all. A kid who had seen something he wasn't supposed to see. But who would believe him? The police were the ones who had buried the body. He couldn't trust them. The minutes stretched into hours as he sat there, trying to think of what to do. His mind kept drifting back to the woods, to the spot where the officers had buried the body. He knew he had to tell someone, but the fear kept him frozen in place. What if the officers found out that he had seen them? What if they came after him? His stomach tightened at the thought. As the sun began to set, Eli's thoughts continued to whirl. He couldn't stay quiet forever. Something had to be done. He had to make sure that the people who had done this were brought to justice. But how? He thought back to the officers, the way they had acted. They weren't just burying a body. There was something deeper, something dark behind their actions. The fear they seemed to have, the way they tried to cover up what they'd done, it was as if they were trying to hide more than just a crime. Eli stood up, his legs shaky as he walked to the window, peering out into the twilight. He thought he saw a figure in the distance, standing by the woods. Could it be one of the officers? Had they been watching him? His heart skipped a beat as he quickly pulled away from the window. No, it couldn't be. But the thought gnawed at him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the officers were keeping an eye on him, as if they knew he had seen something he wasn't supposed to. As Eli paced around the room, he stumbled across a small notebook his father had left behind. It was filled with notes and sketches. Nothing unusual, except for one thing, a list of names and dates. They looked like records, like the kind of thing you might find in a criminal investigation. Eli's fingers trembled as he opened the book to the first page, reading through the names. A shiver ran down his spine when he recognized a name, Officer Brown, the same officer he had seen in the woods earlier that day. Suddenly, everything clicked. The officer who had been so careful when burying the body, the officer who had acted like he had something to hide, was on his father's list. The realization hit Eli like a ton of bricks. His father had been investigating something before he had disappeared. Eli didn't know what it was, but now he knew the officers were involved in something much bigger than just a buried body. Eli's mind raced. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this, but he knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. His father had been investigating something related to the officers, and now it seemed like Eli had stumbled upon the same thing. The officers were hiding something, and he was determined to figure out what. Just as he closed the notebook and stuffed it into his backpack, he heard a noise downstairs. Footsteps. Someone was in the house. Panic set in, and Eli's breath caught in his throat. He slowly crept to the stairs, trying to see who it was without being noticed. His heart pounded as he saw a shadow move near the bottom of the staircase. Who could it be? Was it one of the officers coming for him? Was it someone else who knew what he had seen? He waited for a moment, then crept silently toward the back door, the bag of his father's notes clutched tightly in his hands. His mind was racing, but there was one thing he knew for sure. He couldn't stay here. Not with what he knew. Not with the danger closing in around him. He needed answers, and he needed to find them quickly, before it was too late. Eli's heart raced as he tiptoed through the house, clutching the small notebook in his hands. He could hear the footsteps growing louder, coming closer, and his mind was filled with a mixture of panic and determination. Who was downstairs? What were they doing here? The last thing he wanted was to be caught in the middle of something so dangerous. As he reached the back door, he turned the handle slowly, trying not to make a sound. The air outside was cool, and the night seemed unnaturally quiet. He stepped out into the yard, the soft rustling of the trees the only sound around him. The tension in his chest didn't ease, though. He could still hear the footsteps inside the house, but they had stopped moving. The silence that followed made his skin crawl. Eli didn't waste any time. He knew he couldn't just walk down the street and risk being seen by whoever was in the house. They might recognize him. He had to get somewhere safe. His father had often taken him on trips to the old cabin in the woods, a place so secluded that no one could easily find it. It had to be the perfect hiding spot. He made his way through the darkened yard, trying to stay low and avoid being spotted. The forest was close, just a few yards away, and Eli was already imagining the safety of the trees, the quiet isolation of the cabin. He knew that the officers had no idea about the cabin. It was his father's secret, a place where his father had done most of his research, a place where he had hidden documents, files, and notes on whatever investigation had led him to the officers in the first place. Eli could feel his pulse pounding in his temples. His mind was a swirl of questions and theories. Why had the officers buried that body? Why was there so much blood? And why did it seem like the town was hiding something? He needed answers, but he couldn't trust anyone, not even the police. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became. Whoever was involved in this wasn't just dangerous. They were desperate, and desperate people would do anything to keep their secrets. The cabin felt like the only place where he could start to figure things out. He had to get there. The thought of what was happening back at his house, the officers snooping around, looking for him, kept him moving. Every step brought him closer to the answers, to the truth his father had been trying to uncover before he had disappeared. As he entered the woods, the feeling of being followed didn't leave him. He kept looking over his shoulder, sure that someone was watching him from the shadows. The forest was dark, with only the faint light of the moon guiding him, and every sound seemed amplified. Every snap of a twig underfoot made him flinch. By the time he reached the cabin, his legs were sore, his hands shaking from the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He approached the cabin cautiously, making sure there were no signs of anyone else being there. Everything seemed the same, silent, still. Eli breathed a sigh of relief. He entered the small cabin, his heart still racing. The familiar smell of pine wood and dust filled the air. His father had used this place as his sanctuary, away from the noise and bustle of the world. It was here that he had spent countless hours working, researching, piecing together the information that had led him into the heart of the town's darkest secrets. Eli set the notebook down on the wooden table and opened it carefully. As he flipped through the pages, he found more names. Names of people connected to the officers, names of people who had disappeared. He traced his fingers along the ink, feeling a sense of urgency building inside him. His father had known. He had been on to something, something huge. And now it was up to Eli to finish what his father had started. But just as he started reading through the notes, something caught his eye, a scrap of paper folded at the back of the book. Eli carefully unfolded it, his hands trembling. The note was a warning. Written hastily, it read, "They know. Don't trust anyone. They'll come for you next." The words sent a chill through Eli. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. His father had been investigating the officers, the corruption in the town, and whatever he had uncovered had been dangerous enough to get him killed. Now Eli knew. The danger was real, and the officers were coming for him. He was already in too deep. Before he could even process the implications of the note, he heard something outside. Footsteps. Not in the distance, but near, right by the cabin. Eli froze. The sound grew louder, closer. His breath caught in his throat. He looked around, eyes darting to the door, then to the window. Was it them? The officers? Had they found him already? In the blink of an eye, the door creaked open. A figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the fading light of the evening. Eli's heart sank. Who was it? Eli's heart pounded in his chest, his breath catching in his throat as the figure stepped into the cabin. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. The figure stood just inside the door, its shape barely visible in the dim light. Eli's mind raced as his eyes tried to adjust, trying to figure out who it was. Was it one of the officers? Had they tracked him down already? The person didn't speak at first. There was only the faint rustling of fabric, the shuffle of footsteps on the wooden floor. It wasn't until the figure stepped fully into the light that Eli could see clearly. To his shock, it wasn't a police officer. It was a man, middle-aged with a rugged appearance and a face weathered by years of hard work. His clothes were dirty, worn from what seemed like days of travel. Eli immediately felt a sense of relief, though his suspicion didn't entirely fade. He didn't recognize this man, and his gut told him he wasn't here by accident. "You're the kid, aren't you?" The man's voice was rough but not unfriendly. His eyes were sharp, scanning Eli as he took a cautious step into the cabin. Eli stood frozen, clutching the notebook tightly against his chest. His instinct told him to be careful, not to trust anyone. After everything that had happened, the last thing he wanted was to bring another stranger into the already dangerous situation. But there was something about the man, something in his expression, that made Eli hesitate before speaking. "Who are you?" Eli managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. The man raised his hand, a gesture of reassurance. "Name's Jack. I'm a friend of your father's." Eli's stomach lurched. A friend of his father's. He had no memory of anyone named Jack, especially someone who would just show up like this. The last time Eli had seen his father, he had been working on something dangerous, something that had clearly gotten him killed. Had Jack been involved in it too? Jack seemed to sense Eli's unease and lowered his tone. "I know you've seen something you weren't supposed to see." His eyes grew more intense, like he was trying to read Eli's thoughts. The cops, they've been doing things they don't want getting out. But you're in deeper than you realize, kid. Eli's pulse quickened. The officers? Had they been hiding something even worse than the body? He felt a wave of nausea wash over him. "What are you talking about?" Eli asked, his voice trembling. "What's going on here? What did my father know?" Jack looked at him for a long moment before walking closer. He knelt down to Eli's level, his face growing somber. "Your father was investigating corruption. Big-time corruption. The kind of corruption that runs this town. And the people in power don't want it getting out. He got too close, and they silenced him." Jack paused, his eyes narrowing. "But now they've got their sights on you." Eli felt the weight of Jack's words settle heavily in his chest. His father had been onto something so dangerous that it had cost him his life. And now Eli was tangled up in it, caught in the web of lies, secrets, and violence that had been hidden beneath the surface of his quiet town. "So what do I do?" Eli asked, his voice shaking as the reality of the situation hit him. He was just a kid. How could he possibly fight this? How could he possibly survive? Jack sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "The first thing you need to do is get out of here. You can't stay here, not with what you know. The cops are already after you, and they won't stop until they find you." His voice dropped to a whisper. "But I can help. I have information. Files your father was working on. I know where they're hidden." Eli's eyes widened. Could it be true? Could Jack actually help him find the answers his father had been searching for? Or was this just another trap, another person trying to manipulate him into something he didn't understand? Before Eli could respond, there was a loud crash from outside, the unmistakable sound of something heavy hitting the ground. Eli's heart jumped in his chest as he looked toward the door, his instincts screaming at him to run. Someone was coming. "They're here, kid. We don't have much time," Jack said urgently, grabbing Eli's arm. "You have to trust me if you want to make it out of here alive." Eli didn't hesitate. He nodded quickly, following Jack as he pulled him toward the back exit of the cabin. The footsteps outside grew louder, and the sound of shouting voices reached them through the walls. The officers were closing in. As they burst out of the cabin and into the woods, Eli's mind raced. He didn't know if Jack could be trusted, but right now, he had no choice but to follow him. There was no turning back. The deeper he got into this mystery, the more dangerous it became. But he had no intention of giving up on the truth. No matter what, he was going to find out what had happened to his father, and he was going to make sure the people responsible were held accountable. As they ran through the trees, Eli's fear gave way to determination. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about justice, and he wouldn't rest until he uncovered every dark secret that the town and the officers had tried to bury. Eli's breath caught in his throat as the door creaked open, revealing the shadowy figure standing just outside the cabin. His heart pounded in his chest, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. He couldn't make out the figure's face in the dim light, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Whoever this was, they had followed him. The door swung open further, and a voice rang out, a voice Eli had hoped he would never hear again. "You shouldn't have come here, Eli." It was Officer Thompson, the same officer he had seen in the woods bearing the body. Eli's mind raced, panic flooding his every thought. The officer's face was hard and emotionless, his eyes cold, as if he had been waiting for this moment. Eli backed away, instinctively reaching for the door behind him, but it was too late. The officer had already stepped into the cabin, his heavy boots creaking on the wooden floor. "You're in way over your head, kid," Officer Thompson said, his voice low and menacing. "We didn't want to get you involved, but now that you know too much, we can't just let you go." Eli's mind raced, the words echoing in his ears. Know too much? What did he know? What had his father been investigating? His fingers trembled as he gripped the notebook tightly in his hand. Had his father been close to uncovering something so dangerous that they had to silence him? I don't know anything," Eli stammered, trying to find his voice. "I didn't mean to." "Stop lying," Officer Thompson interrupted, stepping closer. "We know you found the notes. We know you found the body. You've seen too much, and now you're just a liability." Eli's heart was pounding in his chest. The officer was getting closer, and the fear in Eli's chest was suffocating. He didn't have much time. He had to act. Without thinking, Eli bolted toward the window. He heard the officer shout, but it didn't matter. His only goal now was escape. He threw the window open and jumped through it, landing hard on the soft ground outside. Adrenaline surged through him as he scrambled to his feet. His legs burned, and his breath came in ragged gasps as he ran. Ran as fast as he could back into the woods. Back to the safety of the trees, the only place he could think to hide. Behind him, he heard the officer shout again, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps chasing after him. But Eli didn't stop. His only thought was to keep running, to get away from the officer, from the danger, and from the terrifying truth that had just unfolded. As Eli pushed forward, his mind was a blur of thoughts. The officers were corrupt. They had been hiding something for years, and now they were willing to go to any lengths to protect their secrets. He had to expose them. He had to tell someone what was happening before they silenced him like they had his father. The cold air stung his face as he sprinted deeper into the woods, not stopping to look back. His legs were sore, his body exhausted, but there was no turning back now. He had to get to the authorities, to anyone who could help. But just as he thought he might be getting away, a sharp crack echoed through the trees. He stumbled, his foot catching on a root, and he fell hard to the ground. The wind knocked out of him. He heard a shuffling noise, and when he turned to look, he saw a shadow looming over him. It was the officer again, his face twisted into a grin of triumph. Eli's heart dropped. "You thought you could escape?" Officer Thompson sneered, grabbing Eli by the arm and pulling him up. "You're not going anywhere, kid." Eli struggled in the officer's grip, his chest tight with fear. He couldn't give up. He wouldn't give up. "You've made a mistake," the officer growled, tightening his grip. "You should have stayed out of it. Now you're just like your father." Before the officer could say anything more, there was a loud crack from behind them. A figure emerged from the darkness. Another officer. But this one wasn't like the others. His face was hidden beneath a hood, and he moved with a quiet, predatory grace. Eli blinked in confusion as the officer spoke in a voice that was cold and detached. "Let him go." The first officer, Officer Thompson, looked over his shoulder in shock. "Who the hell are you?" The figure didn't respond. Instead, he stepped forward with a swift, purposeful motion, and in a blur of movement, Officer Thompson was knocked back to the ground. He struggled, trying to regain his balance, but the figure was too fast, too strong. Eli's eyes widened as he watched the officer struggle against the mysterious figure. He didn't know who this was or why they were helping him, but he wasn't about to question it. "Go, kid," the stranger said, glancing briefly at Eli. "Run. Get to safety." Eli didn't need to be told twice. He bolted into the woods, his heart pounding, his mind racing. He didn't know who this new figure was, but for the first time since he had discovered the body in the pool, he felt a flicker of hope.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.